All right, today we are going way, way back, thousands of years, to look at the original blueprint for civilization. I mean, how do you even start to organize a society? How do you keep track of everything? How do you measure time itself? Well, the very first answers to those huge questions all came from one place, Mesopotamia. And we're going to see how their solutions literally became the foundation of the world we live in today. So let's just start with this massive question, right? How do you build a civilization completely from scratch? Just imagine it for a second. No cities, no writing, no laws. Where would you even begin? Well, humanity's first real attempt to answer that question happened in one very specific part of the world. And that place was Mesopotamia. The name itself, which comes from ancient Greek, pretty much tells you everything you need to know. It literally means the land between the rivers. And those two rivers are the legendary Tigris and Euphrates, which created this incredibly fertile patch of land in what's now modern-day Iraq. But here's the thing. This wasn't just any fertile land. This was the place where humanity made its most radical change ever, the Neolithic Revolution. For the very first time, we stopped wandering and started farming. We planted the first crops right here around 10,000 BC. And that fundamental shift is exactly why we call this region the cradle of civilization. And boy, did it have a long run. I mean, we are talking about thousands of years of innovation. You had the very first cities, like Uruk, popping up. Then you get the world's first empire under Sargon of Akkad. A few centuries later comes the famous Babylonian king Hammurabi with his legendary law code, followed by the super powerful Assyrians, before the whole region eventually gets conquered by the Persians. It's just an incredible sweep of history, but all of that growth created problems that nobody had ever even dreamed of before. So, as these cities exploded from tiny farming villages into these huge, bustling urban centers filled with thousands and thousands of people, their leaders ran headfirst into a totally new problem, a problem of scale, of pure complexity that no human society had ever had to deal with. Seriously, just think about it. How do you track who paid their taxes? How do you manage enough food for an entire city? How do you make sure everybody knows the laws when you can't just tell them in person? Plain old human memory just isn't going to cut it. You need a system. You need a tool to manage all this information. You basically need an external hard drive for your entire civilization. And that brings us to one of Mesopotamia's most world-changing inventions. See, they solved this problem of complexity by inventing writing. And get this, it wasn't for poetry, it wasn't for telling stories, it was for administration. Writing was literally born from the need for a reliable database. What the Sumerians came up with was a system called cuneiform. The name actually means wedge-shaped, which tells you exactly how they did it. Scribes would take a reed stylus and press these little wedge-like marks into tablets of soft clay. Once those tablets dried, boom, you had a permanent record. It was simple, it was durable, and it was completely revolutionary. Now, this didn't just appear out of nowhere. It evolved. It started off super simple, with just basic pictures of things. We call those pictograms. Then, over time, those pictures got more abstract, turning into standardized signs that stood for whole words. But the real game changer was when the signs started to represent sounds, syllables. All of a sudden, you could write down pretty much anything you could say. And this is the key takeaway, right? This one invention completely rewired their society. Yeah, it started out as a tool for accountants to keep track of barley and sheep, but it quickly became the foundation for everything else, for law codes like Hammurabi's, and eventually for culture itself. It gave us the world's very first great piece of literature, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Okay, so they've solved how to manage information. Awesome. But what about managing actual physical things? As their cities and trade networks got bigger, they ran into another really fundamental challenge, the problem of movement. See, the Mesopotamian plains were fantastic for farming, but they were missing some key resources, like big chunks of stone for building, or metals or timber. To build their amazing cities and temples, they had to trade for this stuff. But how do you efficiently move tons of grain or huge blocks of stone across miles and miles of land? It was a massive logistical headache. The answer was another invention so basic, so fundamental to our world, that we barely even think of it as technology anymore. The wheel. It's such a simple concept, but it completely re-engineered their physical world. I mean, you really can't overstate the power of this one invention. The wheel made carts and wagons possible, which totally revolutionized trade and allowed farming to spread out further. It also led to the war chariot, which changed the face of the battlefield forever. Suddenly, everything got faster and way more efficient. The wheel literally made the ancient world a much, much smaller place. So you see, these aren't just dusty old historical facts. The solutions the Mesopotamians came up with thousands of years ago are still with us. They are embedded in the very fabric of our modern lives, often in ways we don't even realize. Take their invention of writing, cuneiform. That established the very idea of a written record. It's the granddaddy of every alphabet and script that came after it. Every email you send, every book you read, heck, every single letter you see on this screen exists because they first decided to press a wedge into a piece of clay. In that simple circle they invented, the wheel, it is the absolute foundation of almost all modern transportation. Every car, every train, even the landing gear on an airplane, it all traces its ancestry back to that first Mesopotamian cart. Okay, but here's the one that might just blow your mind. The Mesopotamians used a base 60 system for their math. Now, why on earth does that matter to you? Well, it's the reason there are 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour. Every single time you check your watch, you are using Babylonian math. How wild is that? So that kind of leaves us with one last thought. The people of Mesopotamia created these foundational technologies that have shaped humanity for millennia. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are we inventing right now, in our own time, that will be just as essential, just as fundamental, to the people who are living 6,000 years from today?